My name is Bernice Holloway. I am 61 years old. I built my life in Atlanta from the ground up. For 3 decades, I have run a small but thriving fragrance company, blending oils and notes into bottles that carried my name. I am a widow. My late husband left this world far too soon, and all my love, all my effort poured into one person, my son Derek. He is 35 now, a financial director at a major bank downtown, a man I raised with pride, discipline, and tenderness. That Monday started like so many others. The office smelled faintly of lavender from a diffuser I kept on my desk. Papers rustled, phones rang, and the hum of machines surrounded me. At noon, I reached into my leather bag for the lunchbox my daughter-in-law Sierra had packed for me. She always claimed she wanted me to eat well, that eating out was unsafe these days. I smiled at her thoughtfulness as I pulled the container out and placed it on the table. But when I opened the lid, my breath caught. Around the rim of the box, clinging like frost, were tiny white crystals. They sparkled under the fluorescent lights, not sugar, not salt, but something that did not belong. My first instinct was to laugh. I shook my head and muttered, "Sierra must have been tired this morning. She sent me Derek's lunchbox instead of mine." My colleagues leaned closer, curious. One young assistant teased Ms. Holloway, "It looks like the rim of a margarita glass." The office burst into laughter, but the sound echoed strangely in my chest. I tried to chuckle with them, but something in me hesitated. I picked up the box and carried it across the room to a man I trusted more than anyone there, Calvin Price. He was in his late 60s, silver-haired, sharp-eyed. Before retiring, he had been a toxicologist. Now he consulted for my company on workplace safety. He had seen things most of us could never imagine. "Look at this, Calvin," I said with a smile I forced onto my lips. "My daughter-in-law packed lunch for my son, but somehow I ended up with it. See, she even sugared the rim like it was a cocktail." I expected him to laugh to tease me gently. But he didn't laugh. He took the container, tilted it under the harsh office light, and rubbed his finger across the edge. He squinted, then froze. The color drained from his face as if all the blood had left his body. His hand trembled. His lips parted, but no sound came for a long moment. Then he turned to me, his eyes wide with urgency, and his voice thundered across the office. "Bernice, take your son to the hospital now, or he will die." The words struck me like a blade. For a second, the entire room went silent. My colleagues stared, their laughter gone, replaced by confusion and fear. My knees weakened. The box felt heavier in my hands, no longer food, but a bomb ready to explode. "What do you mean?" I whispered, my throat dry, my voice cracking. "I cannot explain it now," Calvin hissed, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. His eyes glistened, red-rimmed, desperate. "Just do as I say. If Derek eats this food, he will not survive." The room spun. I thought of my son, his bright smile in the morning, his careful suit, his tired eyes when he rubbed his stomach at night, and said it was just stress. A chill ran down my spine. I clutched the container as if it might shatter in my hands. The sound of my heartbeat filled my ears, loud, relentless. Faces around me blurred. Voices faded into nothing but a hum. My instincts screamed. Something was terribly wrong. I turned on my heel, stumbling toward the door. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. Every step felt heavy, yet I forced myself forward. I held the lunchbox close to my chest, hugging it as if it were evidence of a crime, as if it carried the weight of life and death. My colleagues called after me, but I could not answer. My only thought was Derek, my boy, the one I had raised through sleepless nights and endless sacrifices. I could not lose him, not like this, not to something hidden in a meal meant to nourish. The office doors banged shut behind me. The air outside felt cold and sharp. My hands trembled, my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. I rushed toward the car, clutching that lunchbox as if it were both proof and poison. My heart pounded so fiercely it threatened to break my ribs. In that moment, one truth consumed me. My world had shifted in a single breath. I had thought I was opening a lunch. Instead, I had opened the door to a nightmare. When I walked out of the office that day, clutching the lunchbox like a ticking bomb, my whole world tilted. But to understand why that box carried more than food, why it became the symbol of betrayal and survival, I need to take you back to where my days usually began, inside my home, surrounded by scents, memories, and the people I loved most. My name is Bernice Holloway. I am 61 years old, a Black woman, a widow, a mother. My husband Samuel passed away more than 15 years ago after a sudden accident on the highway. His death left me hollow, but it also pushed me to build something out of the grief, to give my son Derek a life worth living. I started small with glass bottles on my kitchen counter and oils steeped in pots I bought from discount stores. I mixed lavender with bergamot jasmine, with sandalwood patchouli, with vanilla. At first it was just neighbors buying from me, then local shops, then hotels. Over 3 decades, my kitchen experiments became Holloway Fragrances, a name that traveled beyond Atlanta and into boutiques across the South. I was proud of what I had built, but even more proud of the man Derek had become. He was 35 tall and broad-shouldered with a gentle smile that reminded me of Samuel. He worked as a financial director for a major bank downtown. His suits were always pressed. His ties matched carefully, and he carried himself with a confidence that made people trust him. To me, though, he was still the boy who used to fall asleep on the couch, with his head in my lap, while I hummed gospel tunes on Sunday afternoons. Derek had married Sierra 3 years earlier. I still remember the first time he brought her home. Sierra was radiant. Her skin glowed, her laughter filled every room. She knew how to look people in the eye, how to charm without trying too hard. She carried herself like someone who had always belonged among polished people, though I later learned she had grown up without much money. She wore her struggles like a hidden jewel, never on display, but always glinting when the light hit just right. I welcomed her with open arms. She called me Mom almost immediately, and I let her. Maybe I was too quick to embrace her, too eager to fill the silence Samuel had left with another woman's voice in the kitchen. To me, Sierra wasn't just my son's wife. She was the daughter I never had. Our mornings together followed a rhythm I had come to treasure. The kitchen filled with the aroma of coffee brewing. Its rich, dark scent mingled with the faint sweetness of jasmine oil from the diffuser on the counter. That smell, coffee and jasmine, became the anchor of my mornings, the quiet fragrance that told me I was home. One morning, not long before the Lunchbox incident, I stood at the stove flipping pancakes, while Sierra sliced fruit with graceful precision. Derek sat at the table in his crisp shirt, scrolling through his phone with tired eyes. Long week ahead, I asked, placing a plate in front of him. He sighed, rubbed his forehead, and gave me a weary smile. Just the usual, Mom. Meetings stacked on top of meetings. He stabbed a piece of melon and chewed slowly. Lately, I've just been drained. My stomach's been off and I can't shake this fatigue. My hand froze on the spatula. You should see a doctor, Derek. Don't ignore it. Before he could answer, Sierra leaned over, brushed his shoulder, and laughed lightly. He works too hard, that's all. You know how he is always pushing himself. I'll make sure he eats right, Mom. Don't you worry. Her words were sweet, reassuring. Her smile was flawless. Yet even then a tiny shiver passed through me. I pushed it away. Of course she was right. He did work too hard. I wanted to believe her laughter, to let it wrap around my worry like a warm blanket. That morning played out like so many others. Derek finished his breakfast, adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror, and kissed me on the cheek before heading out. Sierra handed me a neatly packed container with a wink. Your lunch, Mom. Healthy and safe. You know I worry about you. I thanked her, touched by her thoughtfulness. In those moments, I could almost pretend Samuel was still alive, that our family was whole, that mornings. Like this would stretch on forever, but memory has a cruel way of coloring itself after the fact. Now when I recall the scent of jasmine and coffee, I also remember the way Derek's hand lingered on his stomach, the pale shade under his eyes, the way Sierra's smile seemed just a fraction too bright. Foreshadowing, though, I did not see it then. Back then, I convinced myself fatigue was normal for a man climbing the corporate ladder. I told myself Sierra's care was genuine. I pushed away the thought that sometimes when I looked at her, there was a glint in her gaze that didn't match her words. Family drama does not announce itself with thunder. It creeps quietly, hidden in routine. It hides in the way a son says, "I'm just tired." It disguises itself in the way a daughter-in-law laughs and says he works too hard. It seeps into the air with the fragrance of jasmine and coffee until you no longer notice the difference between warmth and warning. I often sat on the porch after breakfast, sipping tea, letting the sun wash over me. From there, I would watch Derek's car pull out of the driveway, Sierra waving at him from the steps. I remember thinking how blessed I was, how lucky that after all my struggles, after raising a son alone, I had a family that seemed steady and loving. That was the illusion I clung to. And that illusion would shatter the day the wrong lunchbox ended up in my hands. The drive to Emory felt like steering through water. Traffic lights turned green, and I did not notice at first. Horns flared behind me. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. The lunchbox sat seat-belted beside me, wrapped in a clear plastic bag Calvin had shoved into my hands. He said very little. He only repeated the same phrase in a low, steady voice, as if pressing it into my bones. "Take your son to the hospital now, or he will die." Atlanta heat shimmered above the asphalt. The air was bright and cruel. When I pulled into the patient drop-off lane at Emory, I felt the chill of the building's air conditioning sweep over me like a winter gust. I carried the bagged lunchbox to the admitting desk and spoke in a voice that did not sound like mine. "I need a toxicology exam." A former toxicologist advised immediate testing. The receptionist looked up. Something in my face must have told her this was urgent. She called for a nurse. The nurse called for a doctor. In minutes, I was ushered into a small consultation room with white walls and a softly humming vent. Dr. Aisha Brooks entered with a brisk, calming presence, a woman in her 40s with tightly coiled hair and careful eyes. She took the bag from me and placed it on a metal tray. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said. I told her, the wrong lunchbox, the glittering crystals, the colleague who went pale, the sentence that ripped the oxygen out of the room. She listened without interrupting. She asked for Derek's name and his workplace. She asked when he last ate. She asked about symptoms. "Stomach pain," I said. "Fatigue that clings to him like fog. He rubs his abdomen at night. He is paler than usual. He has lost weight over the last 2 months." The words tumbled out. With each detail, my voice thinned. She wrote everything down with a sharp pencil, the scratch of graphite cutting the silence. Then she snapped on gloves and opened the container with a deliberate, almost ceremonial care. She used a sterile swab along the rim. She scooped a small portion of the food into a vial. She labeled every step. "We will run a rapid screen," she said. "If it flags, we will follow with confirmatory tests." Her voice was practical. It steadied me. A lab tech wheeled the tray away. The door closed with a polite click. Alone with me, Dr. Brooks sat on the edge of the desk and studied my face. "Has your son been under stress?" she asked. "Have there been any major changes at home?" "Only work," I answered, although the image of Sierra's radiant smile flashed like a blade. "He works long hours. My daughter-in-law often packs his meals to make sure he eats." Dr. Brooks nodded. Her expression gave nothing away. "If he is reachable, ask him not to eat anything right now. Water only. We will know more very soon." I called Derek. Voicemail. I sent a text that shook in my hands. "Do not eat. Call me now." I stared at the typing bubble that never appeared. The room felt cold. My breath left a ghostly mist on the stainless steel of the tray that had held the lunchbox. Time stretched. A clock ticked somewhere each second, a drop of water on stone. When the door opened again, Dr. Brooks returned with a printed sheet and a seriousness that wrapped the air tight. She did not sit. She stood close, her voice low and careful. "The initial panel is positive for arsenic," she said. "We have to assume the food is contaminated. Arsenic can cause chronic poisoning. It injures the stomach and intestines. It damages the liver and the kidneys. Unchecked, it leads to death." The words landed one by one. Stomach, liver, kidneys, death. I felt them as impacts, precise, brutal, final. My knees trembled. I pressed my palm against the counter to steady myself. "Chronic," I repeated. "That means he has been exposed over time." "Yes," she said. "Small doses can accumulate. Symptoms often masquerade as stress, fatigue, gastrointestinal discomfort, even mood changes. Many patients do not realize what is happening until it becomes severe." I could hear Derek's voice in my head. "I am just tired. It is only the workload." I saw his hand again, the absent way it circled his abdomen after dinner. I thought of the new looseness in his suits, the faint hollow under his cheekbones, the fragile quality to his mornings. Tender love folded into a devastating clarity. The shock of it was sharp, cold, relentless. "We need to test him today," Dr. Brooks continued. "Bring him here. If that is not possible, we can coordinate with emergency services. In the meantime, do not confront anyone. Do not discard that container. It is evidence now. I will document the chain of custody. I will call toxicology to prepare." Evidence, I whispered. The lunchbox, the symbol of care, transformed into a weapon, now elevated to proof. I nodded. I thanked her. My voice sounded far away. As I left the hospital corridor, the fluorescent lights seemed brighter. The floor reflected my silhouette in harsh angles. I called Derek again. This time he picked up. His voice was tired, patient, a little amused that his mother sounded so urgent. "Come to Emory," I said. "Right now, drink water only. Eat nothing." Something in my tone must have reached him. He agreed without argument. While I waited, I sat on a hard chair near a window and looked out at the city. Trees shimmered green. Cars flowed like beads on a string. Life moved forward with indifference. I pressed my hand against my chest and felt the steady beating of a heart that belonged to a mother. Protective, fierce, terrified. I tried to breathe in through my nose and exhale slowly the way grief counselors once taught me after Samuel died. It helped, but only a little. Derek arrived with his tie loosened and his face drawn. Dr. Brooks moved swiftly. Blood samples, urine samples. A quiet conversation that was clinical, but kind. I watched my son sit upright, shoulders squared, brave, in the way men try to be brave when their mothers are watching. He did not ask many questions. He squeezed my hand once, tender and brief. When Dr. Brooks left to process the tests, he turned to me. "Mom," he said, "what is this about?" I searched his face, the slight pallor, the lines of fatigue, the fragile way his smile appeared and faded. "We will talk after the doctor returns," I answered. "I need facts, not fears." An hour later, Dr. Brooks returned with the same professional gravity. "Your son's results show elevated arsenic levels," she said. "The pattern is consistent with chronic exposure. We will begin chelation if necessary. We will monitor organ function. There is reason to be cautious, but also to hope because we caught this before a crisis." Hope. The words settled like warm cloth on a cold body. I thanked her again. I held Derek's hand more tightly. He nodded, calm on the surface, bewildered underneath. That night back home, I stood in the doorway of my son's room. He had fallen asleep from exhaustion, the soft rise and fall of his breath. A metronome in the dark. Streetlight edged the curtains with a pale line. The house smelled faintly of jasmine from the diffuser in the hallway. I walked to the bed and touched his forehead with the back of my hand. My fingers trembled. My throat tightened. If I had not found it in time, would I have lost you? The question sliced through me, sharp, merciless. I whispered a prayer that tasted like salt and iron. I promised the quiet night that I would not fail him again. The lunchbox had cracked open a door. On the other side waited truth, cold and necessary. I would walk through it no matter what waited for me, for us. The morning after Emory, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my teacup. The jasmine diffuser in the corner released its gentle fragrance, yet what once soothed me now felt sharp, intrusive, like perfume sprayed on an open wound. Derek was still asleep upstairs, his body finally calmed by medication. I should have been at peace. Instead, a new dread grew inside me, questions that could not be ignored. Calvin's pale face, Dr. Brooks's grave voice, arsenic in the food my daughter-in-law had packed with such care. Evidence she had said that word. But if Sierra truly had poisoned Derek, why, what did she stand to gain? By mid-morning, I called my longtime attorney, Thomas Gaines. He had been with me for more than 20 years, guiding me through contracts, trademarks, and property disputes. He was a man who valued precision over pleasantries, but when Samuel died, he was also the one who visited my home with flowers, who sat quietly until I finished crying. If anyone could shine light into the dark corners of this nightmare, it was Thomas. "Come at once," I said. My voice did not shake. It was clipped cold. He did not question me. His office downtown smelled faintly of leather and old books. Walls lined with certificates and shelves of case law loomed around us, but Thomas himself greeted me with the warmth of someone who knew my scars. His silver hair gleamed under the fluorescent light. His glasses slid down his nose as he studied the tension in my shoulders. Bernice, he said softly, you sound urgent. What has happened? I did not waste time. I need to see my will, every clause, every line. Today. His brows furrowed. Of course. He unlocked a heavy cabinet and pulled out a thick folder stamped with my name. The rustle of paper echoed like whispers as he spread the documents before me. At first the words blurred together: percentages, holdings, real estate valuations, corporate shares. My company, my properties in Atlanta, Savannah, Charleston. Pages and pages of hard-earned triumphs cataloged in dry language. Then I reached the section that froze my blood. Inheritance. Distribution in the event of death. If Derek were alive at my passing, he and Sierra would share equally. But if Derek predeceased me, if my son died before I did, Sierra would inherit nearly everything. I stared at the sentence until the black ink seemed to bleed across the page. My hands trembled. The air in the office felt suddenly thin. Thomas leaned forward. You look as if you've seen a ghost. Talk to me. I forced the words out. If Derek dies first, Sierra receives it all. Yes, he replied carefully. That was the clause we drafted at your request. You wanted to honor her as your daughter to secure her if something happened. It was an act of trust. The words stabbed me. Trust. My throat burned. For years I had called Sierra my daughter. I had believed her laughter, her careful meals, her kindness. Now through the lens of this clause, those memories warped. I saw her smile at dinner, asking casually, how much is the Savannah property worth these days, Mom? I remembered her running her fingers along the marble counter in Charleston, murmuring real estate like this never loses value. Back then I thought it was curiosity, pride in the family she had married into. Today those same words reappeared like cracks, spreading across a mirror warnings I had ignored. Moral conflict raged within me. My heart wanted to cling to the Sierra I loved, the daughter who hugged me tightly on my birthdays. My mind recoiled, replaying the white crystals on the lunchbox rim, the pallor in Derek's cheeks. Could love and betrayal occupy the same face? Thomas's voice cut through my storm. Bernice, I have seen families destroyed by clauses like this. It creates incentive where there should be none. If you suspect wrongdoing, I slammed my palm against the table. The papers rustled violently. I do not suspect Thomas. I know. Arsenic in my son's food. His body weakening by the day. If I had not opened that lunchbox, Derek might be dead. His eyes widened. For a moment, even this seasoned attorney lost composure. Arsenic, he repeated. Voice hoarse. Good Lord, silence fell. Only the hum of the ceiling vent filled the room. I pressed my hand to my mouth to hold back a sob. The ache in my chest was crushing, devastating, yet beneath it burned something sharper. A resolve I had never felt before. I need to change the will, I said. Not tomorrow, not next month. Today. And I need to know how to protect Derek from any legal trap she might already be weaving. Thomas nodded slowly, regaining his steady calm. We can amend it. We can create protective trusts. But Bernice, you must be cautious. If Sierra learns of this, she may accelerate whatever plan she has. The mirror cracked wider. I remembered her at last week's dinner, smiling sweetly as she ladled soup, but her eyes lingered when Derek pushed the bowl away. I remembered her fingers tracing the spine of our property binder lips, curving in a private smile. Every memory now mirrored a hidden hunger. Pain warred with fury inside me. I wanted to scream at the ceiling to tear the claws from the paper. Yet I sat straighter, forced my voice into a calm it did not feel. Then we will not let her know. Not yet. I will play the part of the trusting mother. She must believe nothing has changed. Thomas exhaled long and heavy. You are braver than you realize. No, I thought. I was not brave. I was a mother. And a mother's strength is forged from fear and love combined. When I left his office, the city looked different. Atlanta's skyscrapers, once symbols of ambition, now cast shadows that felt predatory. I walked among strangers with a secret heavier than stone. My son's life, my life's work, my very soul, all balanced on paper truths. That night, as Sierra set plates on the table with her familiar, tender smile, I saw it with new eyes. I noticed the way she glanced at Derek's glass of juice, before handing it to him first. I noticed her question about the company's overseas clients, the sharp glint of calculation behind her tone. The mirror revealed her now. And once seen, it could never be unseen. Dinner that evening should have been ordinary. The table was set the way Sierra always preferred: linen napkins, folded neatly into triangles, silverware aligned like soldiers' candles, flickering against the polished wood. Derek arrived late, shoulders slumped from another endless day at the bank, but he tried to smile as he loosened his tie. I had cooked most of the meal myself. I did not want to take chances anymore, not after the discoveries at Emory and the icy truth of my will. I made roasted chicken collard greens and cornbread. Sierra insisted on preparing the soup, a family recipe she claimed was special. I let her, though. My eyes followed every movement she made in the kitchen. The aroma of garlic and herbs filled the air, but underneath it, I imagined something metallic, bitter. My senses played tricks on me. I tried to calm my breathing to remind myself that the container from earlier was evidence sealed away, and nothing on this table had been tested yet. Derek sat across from me, spoon in hand. He tasted the soup, swallowed, and frowned. "It's a little bitter," he said, wiping his lips with a napkin, almost like something burned. Sierra laughed, light and musical. "You're just exhausted, honey. Your taste buds are tricking you. Eat a little more, it's good for you." She nudged the bowl closer, her eyes glittering with playful insistence. I watched her hand as she poured water into his glass. For just a second, the pitcher trembled. A faint clink rang when the ice cubes hit the rim. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I saw the slightest quiver in her fingers. My heart thudded. Was it nerves, guilt, or simply coincidence? I could not be sure. Yet once you see a crack in glass, you cannot unsee it. I forced my face to remain calm, motherly, safe. I asked Derek about his day, and he recounted stories of meetings and deadlines, his voice tired but steady. Sierra interjected with laughter, complimenting his dedication, painting him as a man who carried the world on his shoulders. She reached for his hand across the table. He smiled weakly, letting her fingers lace with his. But my eyes never left her. I studied every twitch, every blink, every calculated smile, the way she tilted her head when he complained of fatigue, the way her lips curled when she insisted he take another spoonful. Inside, my thoughts raged. Could it be her, the daughter I embraced as my own, the woman I defended to friends who questioned her sudden good fortune? Could she be the hand stirring poison into the pot? The soup cooled in Derek's bowl. He tried another sip, coughed lightly, and set the spoon down. "I think I'll stick to the chicken," he said with a half smile. Sierra's laugh carried a sharper edge this time. "Always so picky. You work too hard, darling. You need proper meals." She reached to push the bowl closer again, but he shook his head gently. A silence hung in the air. The clatter of my fork against my plate sounded too loud. I sipped my water, tasting nothing, my throat tight. If I speak now, will I destroy everything? If I accuse her without proof, will Derek side with her, believing me to be paranoid? But if I remain silent, will I be complicit in his suffering? Moral conflict wrapped itself around me like a vice. I remembered the hospital results. Dr. Brooks's steady warning, Thomas's voice in the law office. My heart wanted to scream, but my mind chained it down. Evidence first, proof undeniable. Until then, I must watch. Dinner continued in fragments. Small talk about clients, about news headlines, about nothing that mattered. Yet beneath the surface, currents swirled. I saw Derek rubbing his stomach again, subtle, absent-minded. I saw Sierra glance at him with a flicker of calculation, before smiling sweetly, the same smile she had offered me when she first called me Mom. When plates were cleared, Sierra carried the dishes to the sink, humming softly. The sound grated on me. It was too cheerful, too perfect. I followed her with my eyes until she turned, and in that instant her gaze locked onto mine. The room seemed to shrink. Her eyes were deep, dark, and unblinking, holding mine with an intensity that froze me in place. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply looked long enough for a shiver to crawl down my spine. In that stare, I heard words unspoken. "I know you're watching. And you should be careful." I lowered my gaze first, breaking the connection, but the damage was done. The illusion of harmony had cracked. Behind her smile lived something sharp, something dangerous, and she wanted me to feel it. That night as I lay in bed, the jasmine diffuser filled the air once more. I turned it off. The scent no longer comforted me. It reminded me of the dinner table, of trembling hands and bitter soup of eyes that warned without words. And in the darkness I whispered to myself, What if the enemy sits at my table every night? And in the darkness, I whispered to myself, what if the enemy sits at my table every night? Derek arrived late, shoulders slumped from another endless day at the bank, but he tried to smile as he loosened his tie. I had cooked most of the meal myself. I did not want to take chances anymore, not after the discoveries at Emory and the icy truth of my will. I made roasted chicken collard greens and cornbread. Sierra insisted on preparing the soup, a family recipe she claimed was special. I let her, though. My eyes followed every movement she made in the kitchen. The aroma of garlic and herbs filled the air, but underneath it, I imagined something metallic bitter. My senses played tricks on me. I tried to calm my breathing to remind myself that the container from earlier was evidence sealed away, and nothing on this table had been tested yet. Derek sat across from me, spoon in hand. He tasted the soup, swallowed, and frowned. It's a little bitter, he said, wiping his lips with a napkin. Almost like something burned. Sierra laughed light and musical. You're just exhausted, honey. Your taste buds are tricking you. Eat a little more, it's good for you. She nudged the bowl closer, her eyes glittering with playful insistence. I watched her hand as she poured water into his glass. For just a second, the pitcher trembled. A faint clink rang when the ice cubes hit the rim. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I saw the slightest quiver in her fingers. My heart thudded. Was it nerves, guilt, or simply coincidence? I could not be sure. Yet once you see a crack in glass, you cannot unsee it. I forced my face to remain calm, motherly safe. I asked Derek about his day, and he recounted stories of meetings and deadlines, his voice tired but steady. Sierra interjected with laughter, complimenting his dedication, painting him as a man who carried the world on his shoulders. She reached for his hand across the table. He smiled weakly, letting her fingers lace with his. But my eyes never left her. I studied every twitch, every blink, every calculated smile. The way she tilted her head when he complained of fatigue. The way her lips curled when she insisted he take another spoonful. Inside, my thoughts raged. Could it be her? The daughter I embraced as my own, the woman I defended to friends who questioned her sudden good fortune? Could she be the hand stirring poison into the pot? The soup cooled in Derek's bowl. He tried another sip, coughed lightly, and set the spoon down. I think I'll stick to the chicken, he said with a half smile. Sierra's laugh carried a sharper edge this time. Always so picky. You work too hard, darling. You need proper meals. She reached to push the bowl closer again, but he shook his head gently. A silence hung in the air. The clatter of my fork against my plate sounded too loud. I sipped my water, tasting nothing, my throat tight. If I speak now, will I destroy everything? If I accuse her without proof, will Derek side with her, believing me to be paranoid? But if I remain silent, will I be complicit in his suffering? Moral conflict wrapped itself around me like a vice. I remembered the hospital results, Dr. Brooks's steady warning, Thomas's voice in the law office. My heart wanted to scream, but my mind chained it down. Evidence first. Proof undeniable. Until then, I must watch. Dinner continued in fragments. Small talk about clients, about news headlines, about nothing that mattered. Yet beneath the surface, currents swirled. I saw Derek rubbing his stomach again, subtle, absent-minded. I saw Sierra glance at him with a flicker of calculation before smiling sweetly, the same smile she had offered me when she first called me Mom. When plates were cleared, Sierra carried the dishes to the sink, humming softly. The sound grated on me. It was too cheerful, too perfect. I followed her with my eyes until she turned, and in that instant, her gaze locked onto mine. The room seemed to shrink. Her eyes were deep, dark, and unblinking, holding mine with an intensity that froze me in place. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply looked long enough for a shiver to crawl down my spine. In that stare, I heard words unspoken. I know you're watching, and you should be careful. I lowered my gaze, first breaking the connection, but the damage was done. The illusion of harmony had cracked. Behind her smile lived something sharp, something dangerous, and she wanted me to feel it. That night, as I lay in bed, the jasmine diffuser filled the air once more. I turned it off. The scent no longer comforted me. It reminded me of the dinner table, of trembling hands and bitter soup of eyes that warned without words. And in the darkness, I whispered to myself, What if the enemy sits at my table every night? The morning after the dinner with the bitter soup, I woke before dawn. The house was silent, but my thoughts churned louder than any storm. I brewed coffee, yet even its familiar aroma brought no comfort. I watched the steam rise from the cup and told myself I could no longer fight this battle alone. Love for my son was powerful, but love without strategy was weakness. I needed help, someone who could see past the walls Sierra built with her beauty and charm. By 9 o'clock, I was seated in the conference room of my company, feigning attention at a quarterly review with my managers. Numbers projected onto the wall blurred together: sales charts, distribution forecasts, profit margins. I nodded, I asked questions, I took notes, but none of it reached me. My mind kept drifting back to Derek's pale face, Sierra's trembling hand at the pitcher, and her eyes locking onto mine like a silent threat. At noon, when the meeting ended, I excused myself and made a phone call I had been dreading but knew was necessary. The number was etched into memory from years ago. Detective Marcus Hill. Marcus and I had known each other since college. He became a police officer, then a detective in Atlanta's Major Crimes Division. Over the years, we kept in touch, occasionally holiday cards, brief calls when tragedies struck. When Samuel died, Marcus was one of the first to sit with me at the funeral, silent but present. If there was anyone I could trust now, it was him. He answered on the second ring. His voice was steady, familiar. "Bernice, it's been a while. How are you holding up?" I swallowed hard. "Not well, Marcus. I need your help, and I need you to believe me." There was a pause. "Tell me where to meet you." We sat across from each other in a quiet diner near downtown, the kind of place where old policemen still ordered black coffee and bacon, and nobody looked twice at whispered conversations. The waitress poured coffee, and I told him everything from the wrong lunchbox to Dr. Brooks' diagnosis, to the bitter soup and the clause in my will. Marcus did not interrupt. He listened with the patience of a man trained to let silence draw out the truth. Only when I finished, my voice trembling, did he lean back and fold his hands. "Bernice," he said, "if what you suspect is true, this is attempted murder, and it is premeditated, but you cannot confront her yet. If you tip her off, she'll change tactics, cover her tracks, and will lose any chance of proving it." My hands clutched the edge of the table. "So what do? I cannot just sit here while my son is poisoned." Marcus leaned closer, his voice low. "You don't sit. You let us build a case. We'll set up surveillance, collect evidence. We need her to reveal herself fully. Once we have proof, video toxicology, chain of custody, then we strike. Until then, you play the role of the trusting mother. Can you do that?" The words stung, but I nodded. I had no choice. "Yes, I can." "Good," he said. "Here's the plan. Tonight I'll send a team to your house. We'll install hidden cameras in the kitchen and dining room. We'll collect samples of every meal she prepares. If she's adding anything, we'll see it." But Bernice listened to me. His eyes locked onto mine, sharp, protective. "Don't let her suspect a thing. If she knows we're watching, the plan collapses." I nodded again, my throat dry. "I understand." We parted after lunch. Marcus left cash on the table, and I walked back into the glaring Atlanta sun, feeling both relief and dread. Relief that I was no longer alone. Dread because now the truth would either free us or destroy us. That evening, I returned home before Sierra. I pretended to be in my study sorting fragrance samples when a quiet knock sounded at the back door. Marcus and 2 officers slipped in, dressed plain, carrying small black cases. They moved with precision like stagehands, setting a scene no one else would ever know existed. One officer slid a camera into the corner of the kitchen cabinet disguised as a smoke detector. Another hid a lens in the dining room light fixture. Marcus carefully placed audio recorders under the counter and tested them with a whisper. Everything was silent, seamless, invisible. When the work was done, Marcus turned to me. "This is step 1. From now on, every dish she touches, every movement she makes, we'll see. We'll take food samples as soon as possible. You don't have to do anything except act normal." I forced a weak smile. "Normal? Yes, I can try." He placed a hand briefly on my shoulder. "Bernice, I know this is crushing, but you're stronger than you think. Remember, you're not alone anymore." By the time Sierra came home, the officers were gone, and the kitchen looked untouched. She entered with her usual brightness, kissing Derek on the cheek, placing groceries on the counter. "I thought I'd make something light tonight," she said. "Soup and salad, it's been so hot." My stomach twisted, but I smiled. "Sounds perfect." As she chopped vegetables, I glanced toward the cabinet where a hidden eye now watched her every move. The secret presence of allies gave me a fragile sense of control. Still, the sight of her humming graceful, so confident in her role, made me shiver. At dinner, Derek ate politely, thanking her for the meal. I forced myself to eat too, though each bite felt like swallowing glass. Sierra laughed and asked about the fragrance orders I had been managing, her voice smooth as ever. Outwardly, I was calm. Inwardly, I knew every laugh, every smile, every drop of water she poured was now recorded. That night when the house was quiet and Sierra had gone upstairs, Marcus texted me a single message: "We're in. Play your part, we'll handle the rest." I set my phone down, lay in the dark, and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, I let my body unclench, if only slightly. Somewhere in the shadows, allies were watching, recording, building the truth, and I whispered into the silence, "Hold on, Derek. Just hold on." By the following week, I knew I could not wait for fate to unravel on its own. Detective Marcus's cameras were in place, the food samples were being collected. But I also knew predators strike faster when they sense their prey slipping away. If Sierra truly married my son for wealth, then I needed to test how tightly she clung to the promise of inheritance. One evening after dinner, I sat at the table with a stack of papers. They were decoys, old drafts of corporate contracts, and philanthropic proposals, but I shuffled them as if they were the most important documents of my life. Derek had gone upstairs to shower. Sierra cleared plates with her usual smile, humming while she worked. I chose that moment, letting my voice carry across the room in a deliberate tone. "I've been thinking," I said, tapping the stack with my pen. "It's time I revised my will. The company has grown beyond us. I want 80% of my estate to go toward a foundation supporting Black women entrepreneurs. That's what Samuel and I always dreamed of, turning our legacy into opportunity." The words hung in the air. Sierra's hands stilled over the sink. The plate she held clinked against the porcelain a second too long before she set it down. When she turned, her smile was still in place, but her eyes betrayed her. A flicker, quick, sharp, like the flash of a blade. Fear just for an instant before she smoothed it into surprise. "That's generous," she said softly, drying her hands. "But Mom, don't you think Derek should be the one to decide how the company is run? After all, he's your son." I lifted my gaze steady. Of course Derek will still be provided for, but wealth is not meant to rot in one family. It should flow outward where it can heal, where it can change lives. She nodded too quickly. Her fingers twisted the towel tighter than necessary. That moment, the quiver in her hands, the flicker in her eyes was enough. Foreshadowing sharper than any prophecy. She knew, and she was afraid. I excused myself and carried the stack of papers upstairs, leaving her in the kitchen. My heart pounded against my ribs, not from fear, but from grim confirmation. If inheritance was her motive, then this announcement had just threatened everything she schemed for. Later that night, after Derek had gone to bed, I sat in Marcus's unmarked van, parked discreetly down the block. The interior smelled of stale coffee and leather seats that had known too many long shifts. A small monitor glowed before us, connected to the hidden cameras. The kitchen appeared in sharp detail, every corner illuminated, though the house itself lay in shadow. Sierra entered, her hair tied back, her face calm as stone. She moved with the precision of someone performing a ritual. She opened the pantry, lifted a small jar, and unscrewed the lid. White powder glistened inside. My throat closed. She carried the jar to the stove where a pot of soup simmered gently. With the ease of someone stirring sugar into tea, she pinched the powder between her fingers and let it rain over the broth. Once, twice, 3 times. The surface clouded, then cleared as she stirred. I pressed my hand to my mouth to silence the cry building in my chest. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and unrelenting. There, Marcus whispered beside me, voice tight with fury. "We've got her." On the screen, Sierra replaced the jar in the pantry, wiped the counter with practiced care, and rinsed the spoon. Not a sound, not a hesitation. She glanced once toward the stairs, as if listening for footsteps before switching off the stove and leaving the kitchen dark. I sat, frozen eyes locked on the replaying image of her delicate hand, scattering death into food. My lungs ached for air. My heart beat so hard I thought it might burst. This was no accident, no paranoia. This was intent cold and clear. My voice broke when I finally whispered, "The daughter-in-law I once loved as my own is nothing more than a murderer in disguise." Marcus didn't look at me. His jaw tightened as he typed into his laptop, securing the footage marking the evidence log. "Bernice, we needed proof. Now we have it. This will hold up in any court." But proof was little comfort in that moment. I thought of birthdays Sierra had baked cakes for, of gifts she had wrapped in shimmering paper, of the way she once held my hand at Samuel's grave. Were all those gestures just rehearsal for this performance? Each memory collapsed in on itself, like walls falling to dust. I wiped my cheeks, but more tears followed. How do you look at someone you once called daughter and see only death? Marcus finally turned his eyes steady. You look at her as she is not as you wanted her to be. And you remember why you're here. For Derek. For his life. I nodded, though the ache did not lessen. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, heavy and endless. Inside, the monitor still glowed with frozen evidence, a woman's hand sprinkling white powder into soup. When Marcus drove me back home, the house looked ordinary, lights glowing warmly through the curtains. But I knew better now. This was not a home anymore. It was a stage where danger performed in silence. And I was no longer just a mother. I was a witness. As I slipped into bed that night, I glanced toward Derek, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm raging around him. I brushed a tear from his cheek and whispered, "I will not let her take you, not while I still breathe." And with that vow, I closed my eyes, though sleep did not come. All I could see was the falling powder like snow over a grave. The plan had been rehearsed down to the smallest detail. Marcus had laid it out carefully, step by step, like a stage director preparing for opening night. Derek had agreed, his jaw tight. His eyes haunted, but his resolve clear. He would pretend to collapse after dinner. The paramedics would rush in. The world would believe he was gone. Only then, Marcus said, would Sierra's mask slip. That evening, I prepared the table as though nothing were unusual. Candles flickered in glass holders. The faint scent of jasmine, my anchor in every storm, floated through the dining room. Sierra arrived in a silk blouse, smiling wide, carrying a pot of soup that steamed with rich aroma. My stomach turned, but I forced myself to sit. She ladled portions with care, setting Derek's bowl before him first. Her hands steady, her tone affectionate. "Eat, my love," she said, brushing a curl from her face. "I made this just for you." Derek met my eyes across the table, the smallest nod passing between us. He lifted the spoon, sipped once, then twice, just enough to play the role. Moments later, his hand pressed against his stomach. He winced, grimacing. His voice was strained. "Mom, it hurts." Then, as rehearsed, he clutched his side, groaned, and collapsed forward onto the table. The bowl tipped, soup spilling across the cloth. Sierra's reaction was immediate. She shot from her chair, rushing to his side, her cries sharp, almost convincing. "Derek, Derek, talk to me." Her hands shook him gently, her voice cracking. To anyone else, it would have seemed the grief of a desperate wife. But I was watching her eyes. In that split second when she thought no one was paying attention, I saw it. The flicker. A glimmer of satisfaction, faint but undeniable, crossed her gaze. Relief, not horror. Triumph, not despair. My heart turned to stone. I leapt from my chair, my voice trembling as I called for help. "Call an ambulance. Please hurry within minutes." Sirens wailed outside. Uniformed paramedics rushed in, efficient and urgent. But I knew their faces. They were Marcus's team, disguised for this performance. They lifted Derek's limp body onto the stretcher-fitted oxygen tubes and wheeled him swiftly toward the waiting vehicle. Sierra followed, her sobs echoing down the hall. "I'm his wife. I have to go with him," she demanded, voice rising, tears streaking her cheeks. One officer stopped her, firm but respectful. "Only one family member can ride. It should be his mother." Her mouth opened in protest, but I placed a trembling hand on her arm. My voice cracked, every word tasting of salt and steel. "Stay here, Sierra. I'll go with him. I'll call you as soon as I know." She hesitated, then nodded, still wiping her eyes. But again I saw the truth shining in her gaze, the faint lift of her shoulders, the subtle ease of her breath. As though a weight had finally been lifted. I followed Derek into the ambulance. Inside, the doors slammed shut, muting the chaos outside. Derek's eyes fluttered open, his voice faint. Is it working? I squeezed his hand, my own trembling. Yes, son. She showed herself. She thinks she's won. The van sped toward the hospital lights, flashing siren screaming. My chest heaved, but my mind stayed sharp. I knew what had to come next. An hour later, after Derek had been moved to the prepared room and fitted with monitors showing a false flatline, I made the call. My phone shook in my hands as I dialed the number saved under home. Sierra answered quickly, her voice raw with staged panic. Bernice, what's happening? Is he okay? I let my silence hang a moment, forcing my breath to break. Then I whispered the line I had practiced, though every word cut me like glass. Sierra? He didn't make it. There was a pause. A long, telling pause. And then, though her voice trembled, I heard it. That shift, that exhale, the faintest sigh of relief wrapped in feigned grief. No, it can't be, she cried. Not my Derek. Her sobs rang high and sharp, but her tone no longer fooled me. I ended the call, my hand covering my mouth as fresh tears burned my eyes. Not because of the lie I had told, but because of the truth it revealed. She was glad. Glad my son was gone. Glad the path was clear for her to claim what she craved. I leaned against the wall of the hospital corridor, shaking from head to toe. God help me, I whispered. My daughter-in-law is rejoicing in my son's death. Through the glass window of the room, I watched Derek lying still, monitors showing flat lines, his chest rising only faintly with controlled breaths. Marcus stood beside me, arms folded, his face carved with grim determination. We're close, he said softly. This will push her to confess. But I could barely hear him. My mind was consumed by Sierra's voice, her sigh of relief replaying in my head, echoing like the tolling of a bell. That night, as I sat in the quiet waiting area, the weight of it all pressed down. My son alive but pretending to be dead. My daughter-in-law celebrating his supposed death. Myself trapped between love and vengeance. The roles had reversed completely. Sierra thought she held the strings, but now for the first time we were the ones pulling them. The trap was set, and the prey had just stepped deeper into it. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and faint lemon polish, the kind of sterile calm that masks fear beneath its surface. Machines beeped softly, monitors glowed, and my son lay still beneath white sheets. To the world outside that door, Derek Holloway was gone. To Sierra, he was the prize finally won. To me, he was a living witness, waiting for the curtain to rise. Detective Marcus and his team had orchestrated everything: the false flatline on the monitor, the careful makeup that made Derek's skin look gray and lifeless, the hidden cameras placed at every angle of the room. I sat behind the glass partition, heart pounding, as I clutched the edge of the chair. The door creaked open. Sierra stepped in, heels clicking against the floor. She wore a black dress, simple but elegant, as though she had rehearsed this role for years. Her eyes darted once toward the empty hall, then softened as she moved closer to the bed. She lowered herself, face inches from Derek's still frame, and whispered. Her voice was sweet, but the venom coiled underneath it was unmistakable. Finally, she breathed, "It's over. All of it. Mine now." The words struck me like a blade. My body trembled. My mouth went dry. The camera above the bed captured every syllable, every flicker of triumph in her eyes. And then it happened. Derek's eyes snapped open. He inhaled sharply, the sound cutting through the sterile silence like a siren. Sierra jerked back her face, collapsing from satisfaction to horror. My son sat up, sheets falling away, monitors beeping back to life. His eyes, once tired, once dim, now burned with something raw, something furious. I heard everything he said, voice ragged but clear, every single word. Sierra stumbled, shaking her head, lips parting to form excuses. But there was no room left for lies. The power that she had held for years, the quiet control over every meal, every smile, every soft-spoken assurance slipped from her fingers in an instant. The door burst open. Marcus entered with 2 officers' cameras in hand. The red recording light blinked. He did not shout. He simply announced, "It's over, Sierra. We have everything we need." For a moment the room froze in tableau, Derek upright in bed. Sierra cornered Marcus, steady as stone, and me pressing my trembling hand against the glass. My breath came in shudders. I stepped inside, the scent of disinfectant sharp against my throat. My heels clicked, echoing against the tile. Sierra turned toward me, her eyes wide, not with guilt, but with fury at being unmasked. I faced her and my voice cracked under the weight of grief and betrayal. I called you daughter. I opened my arms, my home, my heart. I loved you as if you were my own blood. My throat tightened. The words nearly broke me. And you chose poison. You chose greed. You chose death. Sierra's lips twisted into a smile, fragile, desperate. You can't prove. Marcus raised the tablet, playing back the footage. Her whisper echoed across the room. Finally, it's over. Her own words betrayed her. The strength drained from her face. She sagged against the bed, cornered by truth. Derek's voice trembled with fury and pain. You fed me death with your own hands. You watched me suffer. And all the while, you smiled. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. The shift was complete, no longer Sierra controlling the table, the kitchen, the meals. The control belonged to us now, to evidence, to law, to truth. I moved closer to Derek, placing my hand on his shoulder. My tears fell freely. You will not take him from me, I whispered. Half to her, half to myself. Not now, not ever. The officers stepped forward, their cuffs ready. Sierra stiffened, then tried to lunge toward me, words spilling in broken fragments, pleas, curses, denials. But Marcus caught her arm with iron strength, pulling her back. The clink of steel echoed as the cuffs closed around her wrists. She looked at me once more, eyes blazing, mouth trembling. For the first time I saw her stripped of charm, of laughter, of pretense. Only cold desperation remained. As they led her away, the nurse slipped quietly into the room, adjusting Derek's IV, steadying the chaos. I turned to my son, brushing his damp forehead. His eyes softened, though pain still lingered. Mom, he whispered, why? Why would she? I hushed him gently. Because some hearts choose hunger over love. But the truth always finds light. I sat beside him, holding his hand until the trembling in mine stilled. The weight of years of trust misplaced, of danger lived through, pressed heavy on my chest. Yet beneath it a small ember of relief glowed. He was alive. The nightmare had cracked open in public view. Outside the door, Marcus gave me a nod, steady, reassuring. Justice was now in motion. As the room quieted, I looked at my son and whispered a promise only he could hear. We will heal, we will rebuild, and she will never hurt us again. But even as I spoke, I felt the sting of betrayal linger like a scar across my heart. Because the greatest wounds are not from strangers, but from those we once called family. And tonight, in the glare of hospital lights, the truth had finally shifted the balance of power. The interrogation room was stark, almost cruel in its simplicity. A metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs facing each other, fluorescent lights humming overhead. The air smelled faintly of old coffee and disinfectant. I sat behind the 2-way glass, my heart hammering in my chest, my palms pressed together as if in prayer. On the other side sat Sierra, wrists, cuffed hair falling loose around her face. For once her beauty looked brittle like glass, ready to shatter. Detective Marcus placed a thick folder on the table. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm authority filled the room like thunder rolling in the distance. Sierra Holloway, he began. You are under investigation for attempted murder. You can choose to cooperate, or you can let the evidence speak for you. Either way, the truth is already here. She scoffed lightly, though her hands trembled. This is absurd. You're twisting everything. I was caring for Derek, not poisoning him. Marcus flipped open the folder. One by one, he laid out the pieces of her undoing. Photographs of the lunchbox with the crystalline rim. Lab results stamped with the word arsenic. Screenshots of bank transactions showing purchases from chemical suppliers. Finally, the video, still her hand sprinkling white powder into the simmering soup. Sierra's face drained of color. She leaned back, lips parting in disbelief, as though the world had betrayed her by capturing what she thought invisible. And then Marcus pressed play. Her voice, played from the hidden microphone, filled the sterile room. Finally, it's over. Sierra lunged forward, eyes wild. That wasn't, I didn't mean, you don't understand. Her voice cracked into a sob. Marcus remained steady. Explain it then. She collapsed against the table, her cuffs clanging against the metal. Tears streamed freely now, carving streaks through her foundation. Her sobs echoed raw and jagged. I just wanted the money. Don't you see I had nothing my whole life? She built an empire while I scraped by. If she gave it all away to some strangers, what would I have left? What would I be? Her words sliced through me like knives. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth as tears burned my eyes. She continued, voice rising in desperation. I was supposed to have a chance. To live without fear, without hunger. I married into this family and I thought I'd finally escape the dirt I grew up in. But then she spat the word like venom. She wanted to donate everything. And I couldn't go back to nothing. Her sobs turned into screams. I just wanted the money. I didn't want to hurt anyone at first, but it was the only way. Don't you see? She was taking my life away before it even began. I couldn't hold back any longer. Behind the glass, my tears flowed freely. My voice cracked as I whispered to the reflection of the woman I had once called daughter. No, Sierra, it wasn't poverty that chained you. It was greed. And greed has turned you into a monster. Detective Marcus's eyes flicked toward me through the glass, acknowledging my pain without a word. Then he turned back to her. His tone remained even merciless in its calm. So you admit it? You poisoned Derek to secure the inheritance. Her shoulders shook violently. She buried her face in her hands, muffled words slipping through broken sobs. Yes, I did. Because if he died first, everything would come to me. And if Bernice signed that new will, I'd be left with nothing. Do you know what it feels like to taste wealth and then have it ripped away? The room went silent but for her crying. Through the glass I could hardly breathe. My chest ached as though something heavy crushed it. My son's wife, the woman I had welcomed, trusted, loved, was confessing that she had seen us not as family, but as obstacles. She hadn't cared for Derek. She had calculated his death. She hadn't respected me. She had plotted to erase me. Moral conflict twisted inside me. I wanted to scream at her to demand how she could destroy the man who loved her, the mother who embraced her. And yet another part of me, quieter but relentless, remembered the look of hunger I'd once glimpsed in her eyes. Perhaps she had been that desperate girl from a poor background, aching to escape the cycle of scarcity. But desperation had given way to something darker, and ambition had consumed her, until all that remained was greed. Marcus leaned back, closing the folder. Your words are enough. This confession will be submitted with the evidence. You've sealed your fate. Sierra slammed her fists against the table, the cuffs rattling violently. You don't understand, she screamed. I was a victim, too. She had everything while I had scraps. I deserved a piece of it. I deserved a life. Her voice broke the sound raw and guttural. I lowered my head, tears, blurring the sterile room beyond the glass. Quietly, almost to myself, I whispered, Sierra, I would have given you love, safety, family. But you chose greed, and it turned you into something unrecognizable. The officers entered their presence, heavy, final. They lifted Sierra from her chair, her cries echoing like a wounded animal. She twisted against their grip, still shouting, I just wanted the money. You can't blame me for wanting a life. Her voice trailed off as the door shut behind her. Silence fell thick and suffocating. I remained seated, my body trembling, tears running unchecked down my cheeks. On the other side of the glass, the table sat empty, the folder of evidence closed, but still heavy with truth. For years I had thought love was enough to bind family together, that if you opened your heart, others would fill it with warmth. But Sierra's confession had laid bare the cruel truth. Love cannot cure greed. Trust cannot heal hunger for power. As I pressed my hand against the cold glass, I whispered the final words only my heart could hear. Greed devoured you, Sierra, and now it has destroyed everything you could have had. The trial was swift, the verdict inevitable. Sierra faced the weight of her own words, the evidence carved into stone. Attempted murder, conspiracy for inheritance. Her eyes, once sparkling with charm, now stared blankly at the courtroom floor as the gavel came down. I did not attend every hearing. My heart could not bear it. But I was there the day the sentence was read. I sat behind Derek, my hand resting on his shoulder as the judge declared the years she would serve behind bars. A chapter closed, though the scars it left would never fade. Derek's recovery was slow but steady. The poison had left his body weakened, but his spirit refused to bend. I sat by his bedside through countless nights, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, thanking heaven that each breath still came. The doctors spoke of resilience, of treatment and rest, But what I saw was a son determined to live to reclaim what nearly slipped away. He told me once, his voice faint but firm, "Mom, I thought I'd never see another sunrise. Now every morning feels like a gift." Those words planted a seed in me. The Holloway name had been stained by deceit, but I would not let poison define our legacy. With Derek's blessing, I established the Holloway Foundation. Its mission was simple but bold, to support women of color and children who had been silenced, overlooked, or betrayed. The company I had built from my kitchen counter, the perfumes born from my mother's old jasmine recipe, would now carry a fragrance of healing. The first gala was held 6 months after Sierra's conviction. The ballroom shimmered with light chandeliers glowing above tables draped in silver linen. The air itself smelled of gardenia and sandalwood, a scent I had designed to mark the beginning of something new. I stood on the edge of the stage, hands trembling slightly as I looked out at the faces before me. Women in bright dresses, children clutching the hands of volunteers, community leaders who had come to stand with us. Derek walked to the podium, still thinner than before, but standing tall in a crisp suit. His voice carried across the room. "I am here today because of truth, because my mother refused to stay silent, because love triumphed over betrayal. The Holloway Foundation is more than charity. It is survival turned into hope. It is proof that we can take what tried to destroy us and turn it into something that saves." The applause swelled, rolling through the hall like a tide. My eyes blurred with tears as I watched him speak every word, a victory against the darkness we had endured. The montage of healing played out like a story I had never dared to dream. A young mother receiving a scholarship to study business, tears streaming down her cheeks. A child opening a backpack filled with supplies, his laughter ringing like music. A room filled with women learning to craft fragrances, their hands steady, their eyes shining with newfound pride. Every image felt like a balm to the wounds Sierra had carved. Every success was proof that we were no longer defined by her greed. Weeks later, when the noise of events and the flurry of reporters had passed, I returned to my home in Atlanta. The porch was bathed in the soft gold of a Georgia sunset. I sat with a cup of chamomile tea, the jasmine vines along the fence swaying gently in the breeze. Derek joined me, his steps still a little slow, but his smile stronger now. He lowered himself into the chair beside me, letting the silence stretch. The cicadas hummed, the world softened, and for the first time in what felt like years, I allowed myself to breathe without fear. I looked out at the horizon, at the pink and orange hues bleeding into the sky, and whispered words that rose from the depths of my soul. Poison tried to destroy us, but love turned it into fragrance. The air caught them, carried them into the fading light. In that moment, I knew the story was bigger than me, bigger than Derek, bigger even than the betrayal that had nearly broken us. It was about what we choose when faced with ruin. To let bitterness consume us, or to transform it into something worth leaving behind. I turned to my son, pressing his hand gently. "We will never forget what happened," I said, my voice steady. "But we will not let it define us. Our legacy will be love, not poison." He nodded, eyes glistening, his voice quiet but sure. "Love, Mom. Always love." The sun dipped lower, casting its final glow across our faces. For the first time since the day I opened that cursed lunchbox, I felt at peace. And now, to you who have walked with me through this story, I offer a question. If it had been you, if betrayal had crept into your home, into your bloodline, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent, keeping the fragile illusion of peace? Or would you have stood trembling but unbroken to reclaim your voice? Because every family hides shadows, and every shadow demands a choice. If this story touched your heart, I ask you to take a moment. What would you do if you were in my place? Would you stay silent to keep the fragile peace, or would you stand up to reclaim your voice? I read every comment. Your words matter. Tell me where you're watching from and share your thoughts with our community. If you believe love is stronger than betrayal, hit the like button, subscribe so you won't miss the next story of quiet strength, justice, and healing. Because together we are not just listening to stories, we are carrying them forward.